authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation. We are live on Facebook. Hey, new Facebook sippers. Thanks for joining. Twitch. Hi, Twitchers. Thanks for becoming sippers. And on Kick, hey, girls. Thank you for also joining Tanisha Talks Teas as a new sipper. We're going to get right into it, y'all. Let me share my screen. How is everybody on this 4th of July? I hope everybody is safe. Please keep you and your loved ones safe, especially if you guys are popping fireworks. We are definitely going to be popping some fireworks. We have our big family pack of fireworks and stuff. And so we're looking forward to getting out after the sun goes down and popping some fireworks. So Diddy was denied bail, y'all. What is that all about? Let's review what that looked like for Diddy. We do know is that Diddy was
has been denied
of the transpo of HO, transpo of a 304. Okay. He was charged and convicted of transpo of a 304 and twice convicted of each charge. He was let free of acquitted of the other three more serious charges, right? So let's get into it.
bail after the verdict in his sex trafficking case, and here's how he took the news. According to NBC News reporters in the courtroom, Combs appeared, quote, deflated as his hopes of going home were seemingly dashed as his lawyers attempted to convince Judge Aaron Subramanian to release their client ahead of his sentencing. In his ruling, Subramanian cited Combs' years-long pattern of violence as a reason for him to remain behind bars, adding that he continues to be a danger to others and unable to follow the law. Arguing that Combs, who pleaded not guilty to sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, as well as transportation to engage in prostitution, was acquitted on the three most serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering, and only convicted of prostitution-related offenses. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo insisted he should be released on appropriate conditions. As Agnifilo outlined, Combs would be willing to put up a $1 million cash bond, signed by his mom, Janice Combs, his sister, Keisha Combs, and Sarah Chapman, the mother of Combs' eldest daughter, Chance Combs, and have no access to his private plane, which is currently grounded in Maui. He also agreed to surrender his passport, undergo drug testing, and restrict travel to areas of New York, Florida, and California as necessary to attend court and meet with lawyers. According to NBC News, Combs was passing notes to Agnifilo as the attorney spoke to the judge to argue for Combs' release. After Agnifilo finished, Combs raised his hand and started to get up, seemingly to speak. Agnifilo told the judge he would find out what Combs had to say, and Combs' attorneys rushed to speak with him. Ultimately, he did not end up saying anything. Combs will remain in jail until his sentencing, which is scheduled for October 3rd.
Diddy denied bail, y'all. So what that looks like for Diddy is he will sit in the detention center in New York, where he has been since September of 2024, and remain there until October 3rd. That is about 3 months, until his sentencing, right? So
Yeah.
I wonder if Diddy can request other bail, requests for himself to be let out on bail more than just that one time. I wonder if he will. Okay. Will Diddy, ask for bail again in the next 3 months? We're going to have to see, right? So.
Thank you for joining us. So many moving parts here today. We know prosecutors argued that there was no legal basis for Combs to be granted bail, while his defense had argued that Combs had demonstrated model behavior while in detention during the trial. So ultimately, why do you think Combs didn't make bail?
Well, Meg, the judge denied bail or release pending his sentencing because he was found guilty of 2 serious crimes. And so generally speaking, when that happens, the person is remanded to custody and is held pending sentencing. There were some unusual circumstances here because he had already served pretrial detention since September, and he was acquitted of these much more serious crimes.
So as we see here, Diddy was acquitted on count 1, racketeering conspiracy, count 2, ex-trafficking, and count 4, ex-trafficking. He was convicted on count 3 and count 5 of transportation of a 304. Both of those charges stuck on Diddy, whereas Diddy can receive. However, Diddy's not a prior convicted person. Diddy has no prior criminal history, so we don't believe Diddy will receive up to 20 years. However, both of those charges that he was convicted of, transpo of a 304, count 3 and 5, they do carry 10-year mandatory and minimum of like a year to probation.
Was offering a bond and other conditions, so it seemed like he could have the opportunity to walk out that door, but that's not going to happen so quickly.
So, Chris, we know the sentencing was scheduled for October 3rd, and there's a status update on July 9th. He will be in custody until his sentencing. Could Combs' legal team appeal his guilty charges? If so, what would that process look like?
Well, yes, I would anticipate he'll appeal. Usually that's going to happen after his sentence is rendered in October. And he could try to go to the Court of Appeal beforehand and say that he should be released pending that sentencing. But I don't think the Court of Appeal will interfere with the judge's really broad discretion on how to treat a defendant who's been found guilty.
All of the legal experts today have been calling this a big win for the defense. Why do you think the prosecution couldn't convince the jury on those more serious charges?
Well, Meg, the RICO charge was really complicated, and it never really seemed to fit the behavior that we saw here in this case. The RICO charges are usually for the mafia or a cartel, some kind of organized crime ring. And here, this was one guy alleged of doing some really depraved and horrible things for his own gratification. Yes, there were other people that he used to assist him, but those folks worked for him and sometimes were even abused by him. So this was more of an enterprise by one person. It really didn't fit. And it looked like a little bit of an overcharge, actually, on what he was actually doing. And the jury just couldn't come to a consensus on these bigger charges. And really, as a compromise, it appears, agreed to the transportation for prostitution charges that they could all find his verdict on this morning.
And we know that both of those charges carry up to 10 years each in prison. What kind of sentencing do you think Combs will ultimately receive?
Well, there's no minimum sentence for that charge. It's a maximum of 10 years. There's guidelines under federal law. They're arguing over whether that could be 2 years or 5 years in prison. He will have served over a year in detention by the time his sentencing happens, and he'll get credit for that time. He also has no criminal history that we're aware of, so there's no prior convictions. And so this might indicate a lower sentence. And after he gets credit for the time that he served, he maybe could do no time, or maybe 1 or 2 years is potentially in play.
And is it possible during that status update on July 9th that the defense team could argue to move that sentencing up?
Absolutely. They already made that play and saying, we want this done earlier. And the judge said, well, this is going to take time. There's reports that need to be done. The court will look at aggravating and mitigating factors on what sentence to issue. They're also going to look at the victim impact statements here. And the court said, we're going to take our time doing that. Of course, Diddy wants to get out of custody earlier, but, yes, I imagine he's going to renew that plea to accelerate this process. Why wait 3 months to develop that information?
I'm curious what your reaction was this morning when the jury came back after only about an hour of deliberating and was able to deliver a verdict. Yesterday, we heard that they could not reach a unanimous verdict. What do you think changed?
Well, Meg, these people invested 7 weeks of their lives into this, and I believe they wanted to reach a verdict. And so they were really opposed, it seemed like yesterday, and couldn't come to consensus. They slept on it and must have just realized, hey, there's one thing we can agree on, that's the transportation. The other charges we can't agree on. And instead of having that a deadlocked or hung jury on those other charges, they just said, hey, we're going to acquit them on that. And that's the magic or mystery that happens in juries. It's unpredictable. At least they were able to come to an agreement, all 12 of the jurors.
All right, Chris Melcher, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman has been covering the trial. She is outside now. Katrina, thank you for joining us. First of all, just why did the judge deny bail for the music mogul?
The judge says that he agrees with the government that Sean Combs should remain in detention. The thing that he really talked about the most was the issue of violence, that Sean Combs' own defense team multiple times during this trial, including during closing arguments, admitted to domestic violence, that he has this violent temper. And as a result, they do think that he poses a safety risk. And this is one of the requirements. There's also an exception for extraordinary circumstances, but the judge said that the personal circumstances that Sean Combs listed as reasons that he needed to be out just don't rise to that level. But I think the real crux of this is that so many times during this case, his team admitted that the domestic violence existed. They didn't try to refute that. And there is this risk of safety threat.
Katrina, you were in the courtroom today. Paint a picture for us. What was Combs' demeanor like first after the verdict and then hearing his bail was denied?
I mean, there is such a contrast today. Earlier, Combs was absolutely joyous about this verdict. He was acquitted on the most significant charges against him. So in many ways, this is a victory for him, absolutely. But he did seem much more worried after he heard that he wasn't going to be getting bail. He sat there looking very serious, passing notes to his attorney. At one point, he actually raised his hand, and his lawyer for a moment indicated that Combs wanted to say something. So we thought he might speak in court. He ultimately decided not to. But there was a moment after court. He turned to his family. He told them, we'll make it through this. Stay in the light. And he said that he'll see them all when he gets out. He said that twice. And then his attorney, Mark Agnifilo, went over to the family and really gave them a pep talk. There were 2 rows full of his children, his family, his supporters, even Fahim, his security guard, who was named as a co-conspirator in the racketeering conspiracy. And what Mark Agnifilo told them is that today was a great day, that it is extremely rare. In fact, this is the first time ever that the Southern District of New York has lost a racketeering case, he said, and that Sean Combs really beat this by showing up, facing this like a man, not being afraid, and that he's going to ultimately get his life back. So despite the fact that Sean Combs is not walking free tonight, he still says this is absolutely a victory for him and for his family.
All right, Katrina Kaufman, thank you so much for all your thorough reporting and for all those interesting details inside the courtroom.
All right, y'all. So as we are seeing,
breaking news,
Diddy
did
not get bail. And I, have no sentiments for it. We understood that they had an assignment and they are executing it to the best that they possibly can. Diddy probably falls under the guidelines of being granted bail. Unfortunately, he's not falling under the skin color for it. So we're going to listen in on Nancy Grace now reacting to the Diddy verdict.
Diddy goes to jail after exuberant celebrations outside the courthouse with Diddy fans dousing each other with baby oil, of course. Now a somber tone as Sean Combs heads to jail. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us. Diddy loving it.
He's loving all the attention. He's loving that everybody is talking about him.
I can smell it a mile away, and Diddy is loving it.
And did you guys hear Nancy Grace say about, people outside throwing baby oil all over themselves? There was a video up to the Neighborhood Talk of Armand Wiggins, right? Armand Wiggins is a pretty popular YouTuber that got onto Fox Soul, the Claudia Jordan and Al Reynolds show that Funky Dineva was on as well. And that was, ended probably prematurely, if not for some antics going on around in the workplace with them. However, Armand Wiggins made his way up onto the Nancy Grace show to talk about the Diddy case trial. And he was outside the courthouse when the Diddy verdict was read, throwing baby oil on himself. So I tagged Nancy Grace in the video of Armand doing that. I am waiting to see if maybe she directly responded to Armand. However, you did hear her, of course, say that, she saw them throwing baby oil on each other. And it was like a mockery to people that, were real victims of Diddy and all of that. So, yeah, that was just a wild moment.
Diddy is loving this. You're absolutely right.
After a split verdict earlier in the day where Sean Combs is acquitted of RICO, 2 other counts come into play. Sean Combs convicted on 2 felony counts. There was a massive argument via paper to keep Sean Combs behind bars, the defense fighting tooth and nail to let him out on appeal bond, which means you get out while your conviction is being appealed. Joining me right now, Tisa Tells. You can find her on YouTube at Tisa Tells. Tisa, start at the beginning. Start with the verdict, the split. What happened?
If you're a man, then you've probably heard multiple versions of the following sayings throughout your entire life. Man up, don't cry, and...
When the jury walked in, everybody was on pins and needles. I'm not going to lie. Everybody in the courtroom expected him to be guilty on.
And there are so many things going around about Tisa Tells. I'm not telling the tales of exactly whatever was actually going on in the courtroom, but people are alleging that Tisa Tells had some type of connection with the prosecution so that she could get into the overflow courtrooms and see first, and firsthand and first before anybody else, whatever was going on. So it's been a lot going on, y'all. Happy 4th of July, sippers. We are sipping tea on Diddy denied bail and all of that, y'all. Yeah, drop your teacups in the chat. I hope everybody's being safe and blessed on this 4th of July.
At least the sex trafficking. There was a somber tone. They walked in, and when they said, please read, and they said, what do you find ye? On count 1, not guilty. It was a bomb that went off in the courtroom. The public audibly gasped. Nobody was expecting that. There were cheers of joy from Diddy's side. Count 2, what say ye? Not guilty. Again, another bombshell went off. People were in utter disbelief. Even Diddy's most ardent supporters did not expect him to get off on the count of sex trafficking with Cassie. Count 3, when they said guilty for transportation of a prostitute, when they said guilty for the mayonnaise, that is when Diddy's team actually cheered. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, come on. Almost like we were watching a pro football game. When the other ones came in after that, there were jaws on the ground. It was unbelievable. People were looking at the jury, searching into how they could get a verdict in this day and age. They heard Cassie's mother, the 20,000. They heard Capricorn Clark. They heard about the savage beatings. And it was unbelievable that the only thing they said was prostitution. And that is because Daniel Phillips, in his testimony, actually said, at least I'm guessing that just because, that he got paid to have sex for money. It was a travesty. It was an all-out circus. Everybody, including myself, are running to safety.
I've got a question for you, Tisa Tells, and everyone's going to want to know this. You're in a car right now. You had to leave the courthouse. Why?
I had to leave the courthouse because Diddy's supporters were out of control. The first time I ran and did my live, of course, I had 2 armed security guys. Everyone told me, the people in the courthouse, like, make sure you have security. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. It wasn't just me, but I'll tell you what I experienced. Diddy's supporters surrounding me, threatening me, saying that they were going to hurt me. It was a serious situation. It got so bad, and there was so much chaos and violence that they actually had to lock the courtroom down and force the Diddy supporters across the street. It was something myself, the news media, mainstream media, new media have never seen in their lives. The level, and again, the jurors, I hope to God they know how to sleep at night, because again, I'm sure they did their duty. But when all that chaos was happening, as I was being threatened and ushered out by armed security people, I thought, this is what the jury did. They sent a signal that it is okay to use violence. It's okay to drug people up. It's okay to live a life of debauchery. It's okay to do whatever you want, because guess what? If you work hard enough and you have enough money and enough delusional fans and you have ingrained yourself in culture enough, that you can do whatever you want. And 12 of your peers will look the other way. Again, this jury was shocking.
Tisa Tells, when you say that Sean Combs supporters threatened you, what were they saying?
They were saying, you effing B, we're going to kill you, you effing B. Apparently I work for the feds. You're a plant. You made this all up because of you. Again, they're not too smart. Because of you, that's how this case got started. We're going to treat you worse than we treated Cassie. Cassie, what we do to you is going to be nothing that they had on Cassie. They were screaming. They were yelling. Some people were saying, apologize to Diddy. Apologize to Diddy. Of course, thank goodness, we had Lenny and we had Jimmy, 2 of the best armed guards out there. So the one thing is they started foaming like wild dogs, like not a woman. And they realized they could not just do what they felt. And they started foaming like wild dogs, screaming, their voices cracking in anger that they viscerally wanted to rip me apart. This is why their hero had been exonerated. Even in the best of times, these people that support him, there's something wrong with it. And I gotta tell you, Nancy, it wasn't just me. It was not just me. It was anybody that didn't have a pro Diddy stance from the beginning. That's who suffered.
Joining me in all-star panel, but I want to thank Tisa Tells for for what she's doing tonight. You know, Rob Shooter is joining me. Rob, I really don't know where to start. This is a blow. This is a huge blow to crime victims all over the country. Huge blow. The big news is right now, Sean Combs is going to jail. Okay?
Yeah.
He's going to jail. I was actually worried that somehow the judge would contravene the law. And the law is, under the Bail Reform Act, that for these two charges on which he was convicted, he has to go to jail. There is no appeal bond, period. But I was so concerned that the judge would somehow find a way to let him walk. And all this time, Shooter, we've been hearing, I've got all these letters here. Here's one from Deontay Nash, in fear, talking about Combs's long, well-documented history of violence.
Okay, so Nancy Grace explains there that there will be no appeal bond for Diddy. So apparently Diddy cannot appeal his bail denial. So let's keep on sipping this tea.
Violent retaliatory behavior. They're afraid, Rob Shooter. Guys, Shooter knows Combs better than any of us. His longtime publicist no more. But now you can find him at his Substack, robshooter.substack.com, and Naughty But Nice podcast. Shooter, I got to tell you, it was like a kick in the stomach when that split verdict came down.
Yeah, I think everybody was stunned. Before I continue then, Nancy, I just want to send my best to Tisha. What happened to her outside that courthouse is horrific. It's wrong. And I'm afraid these people now have been emboldened because their hero, their idol, Diddy, looks like he is going to walk free. So this morning when we heard the judgment, I think we were all shell-shocked. We were all heartbroken. We all felt like we'd been kicked in the stomach. However, as the day has gone on, we do have to remember, Nancy, that he has been found guilty of two very serious charges. If any other celebrity had been charged with those two charges, those alone, and been found guilty, we would be done with them. So the celebration from Team Diddy, the disappointment from people who've been watching this as closely as we have, I think we can take a step back, both sides, and realize that this is not a good day for Diddy. He is now a federal criminal. He's in jail tonight. He's going to remain there until he is sentenced. And so at least we'll take some solace in that.
You know, Rob Shooter, I've been getting flooded by crime victims, rape victims from all walks of life that are upset. They don't really sound mad yet. They're devastated. They're sad. They can't believe this has happened. I've been already subjected to a lot of attacks, verbal attacks. Nothing like what Tisa Tells has been subjected to already. But I give the credit to the prosecutors for going in there, and I truly believe this was a David and Goliath. And they went in against one of the highest profile personalities in our country, Sean Combs, who many people think that they know and they love him. And for some reason, that blinded them, that drowned out everything that three sex attack victims said. And one had the video. One had the video. I don't get it, Rob Shooter. Give me some insight into how Sean Combs got a split verdict. But yes, you're right. He is going to jail on two felonies. Two felonies. That's a victory that Sean Combs is going to jail.
Yeah, that's a victory. We have to hang on to that, Nancy, because in this moment, in this hour, there's not a lot of hope. Everything seems so bad. We have let down not just the people in this case, but victims around the world. Diddy now will be empowered. This is not the end of the story, Nancy. When he gets out of jail, if he gets out of jail, his behavior will not change because he thinks he has gotten away with it. again. If you enable someone, Nancy, they do not change. So mark my words, Nancy, this is not the end of the Diddy story. It's the end of a very, very sad chapter. And I think we've let a lot of people down. And as far as being concerned about safety, I just broke reporting that Cassie has now increased her security. Cassie in New York, her home, now has security increased. And I think a lot of other people, courageous people who came forward, assistants, people that worked with Diddy, came forward and testified. They're very vulnerable and they are very, very scared right now.
When, if ever, was the last time you checked your home's title? Well, if you're like me, the answer is to fix it. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. When I learned about the split verdict, I was speechless. I couldn't believe it, but it's happened. So what do you want the prosecutors to do? Go home and hide under the bed? Should they have just never even brought the case? They did it because they believed it. And I still do believe it, Lynn. I believe Cassie Ventura was coerced and beaten into having sex with male sex workers. That's sex trafficking. I believe her.
I believe Cassie, I believe Jane, I believe sex trafficking. This is a sober reflection today on everything I've been talking about for about 8 weeks now with this trial, that the public, and I'm gonna say the jurors, okay, do not understand predation, power, what sex trafficking is. And a reminder, again, this case was not just about one man. This case was about all of the victims across the country, the world, whose voices have been silenced because they don't come forward, because the justice system usually picks power, wealth, status over believing their truths. But I want to point out, as the day unrolled, there is hope. I've spent all day coaching people, talking people, fielding text messages. And I want to say, you know what? These victims that reach out to me, Nancy, they're not even angry. You know what they keep saying? Please, Lynn, please remind everybody we're victims. Please remind everybody we have a voice. Please remind everybody we are here. And that goes back to we have to do in society a better job of educating about sex trafficking, about trauma bonding, trauma, what predation really looks like. This is the most frightening thing to empower this Sean Combs. And I just want to make the commitment that we will work very hard to continue reforming, raising awareness, and working with the justice system.
Straight back out to Tisa Tells, who has made it to a safe location. Tisa Tells, I want to talk about what happened when the split verdict was announced in the courtroom, and then I want to move to the appeal bond hearing. Let's start with the split verdict. Take it from the very beginning.
The split verdict from the very beginning, when you heard count one, not guilty, a bomb went off in the courtroom, not guilty. No one could believe it. Sean Diddy's Combs side even looked around as if they hadn't heard correctly. No one thought that the jury would actually go this far. Everybody thought that the delay meant that he was actually guilty. When the second count was read, again, jaws dropped open. Diddy leaned back in relief, raised his hands. The defense team was like, yes! I get it. They literally pulled a magic act, okay? They literally pulled a magic act. His team, his side started celebrating, started saying, yeah, when we heard the third count, guilty for the prostitution, okay? Everyone on his side was like, that's okay, that's okay. They were clapping almost like they were watching a football game. When they first came out with the verdict, the prosecution was doing what they were doing. They were looking straight. It is a job, I would assume, to look like they always have it under control. By the time they got to the third count, Maureen Comey looked over at the jury in disbelief. Literally, again, she's always very composed. But even for her to finally look over at the jury on some, are you kidding me? And she just kept looking at the jury as they read the counts. Again, I know the jury did their best, but I cannot feel that justice was served. How can you forget the vicious beatings? How can you forget the $20K the mom had to wire in order for two freak-off tapes not to be released? Okay, that's what she thought when she wired it. How can you forget what happened to Bonna being hung over a balcony? She might have got the date wrong by a few days, but the point is it happened. How you can forget Deontay Nash and her best friend Carrie, who got a hanger to the head and saw Cassie getting pile driven into the corner of a bed on purpose. How can you forget all that and come back and say, you know what? We don't see anything criminal here. Again, we can argue about the prosecution. Got Diddy on the head. We can argue about the prosecution, what they could have did better. But the fact that the jury chose to overlook all that, it brought me back to what Rob Shooter said weeks ago when I first started joining you, Nasty, that people get starstruck and they want some of that magic. And it makes me wonder, were they starstruck? Were they feeling sorry and trying to protect a legacy for someone that hid their depravity and their evil ways behind it? It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder.
Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved. Sean Combs, aka Diddy, goes to jail. That's right. After a last-ditch bid at an appeal bond, he was denied and is going to jail right now as we speak. Joining me an all-star panel, back to Tisa Tells joining us. She had to be escorted by armed guards out of the courthouse and leave the scene after she was mobbed by Diddy fans. Explain to me what was happening outside the courthouse. I understand that once the split verdict was announced, the Diddy followers, the Diddy worshipers went cray outside the courthouse, actually dousing each other with baby oil and chanting.
They formed a circle. It looked like a mosh pit of depravity. They were spraying baby oil on each other, jumping around, feeling fantastic. One woman in a pair of Calvin Klein briefs and a bra started jumping up and down, wiggling while they sat there spraying baby oil on her, and the crowd was chanting, yay, 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 go, and hyping them up. It was a monstrous ball of depravity. When I say I was sickened, when I say I shook my head, and when I said, these are the peers, these are the jury of the peers, and it makes me wonder, as the jury goes home and they look at the television sets and they see what their decision cost and what was on the line, it makes me wonder, how can they sleep at night? It was absolute pandemonium. In between the jumping up and down with the baby oil, women willingly baby oil.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay sipping.